All right, let's jump right in, shall we? We're diving deep into German politics today, specifically everything that's been going on since the 2025 election.
It's been quite a shakeup.
You can say that again. We're going to try to untangle it all.
Yeah, lots to unpack.
For sure. We've got articles, expert opinions, even some historical parallels to explore.
It's important to remember that what happens in Germany
Oh, absolutely.
affects us all.
It has a ripple effect on global politics.
Exactly.
Okay, so to set the scene, the center-right actually won the election.
The CDU-CSU.
Right, the Christian Democrats, CDU, and their Bavarian partners, the CSU.
But they fell short of a majority.
Didn't quite get enough seats to go it alone.
So they need a coalition partner.
And looks like it'll be the SPD.
Social Democrats, yeah, most likely.
Interesting, because they had a terrible election.
Historically bad, actually.
But they're still vital for forming a government.
It's the nature of German politics.
And then we have the AfD, the Alternative for Germany.
Ah, yes. They're the real game changers this time around.
More than double their votes, right?
They're now the second largest party.
Some are saying they're a threat to stability.
Oh, absolutely. There's concern there.
Yeah.
Especially for a party that's only been around for...
What, like 12 years?
Yeah, something like that.
Why such a huge surge in support, do you think?
Well, they've tapped into some deep anxieties, especially in the former East Germany.
Right, I was going to ask about that East-West divide. Like the ghost of the Berlin Wall is still there.
It's there in the voting patterns, for sure. The West leans towards the CDU-CSU, while the East is more and more AfD territory.
And it's not just geographic, right? There's a generational divide, too.
You see that with the Left Party. Very popular with younger voters.
Well, the CDU-CSU appeals to the older generation.
Exactly. It's almost like Germany's having an identity crisis on multiple levels.
So amidst all this, Friedrich Merz emerges as the likely chancellor.
A fascinating figure.
Tell me about him.
Well, he's a lawyer.
Really?
Even a pilot, actually.
I had no idea. Okay. Lawyer, pilot, and,
Politician. He was prominent in the CDU, but sidelined during the Merkel years.
And now he's back with a vengeance, it seems.
He's got some ambitious plans.
Yeah, strengthening Europe, independence from the U.S., rebuilding the economy.
Big goals.
It's a tall order, to say the least.
Especially with the far right breathing down his neck and that relationship with the U.S.
Speaking of which, Merz calling for independence from the U.S. That's a surprise.
Well, there's been a growing sense of disillusionment with the U.S. among Germans.
Really? What happened?
Well, the recent events with the peace negotiations, leaving Europe and Ukraine out of the discussions, didn't sit well with many.
Right, I can see how that would rub people the wrong way.
Merz is reflecting that sentiment, this feeling that the U.S. isn't the reliable partner it once was.
He's even questioning NATO's future, isn't he? And I read that he said he has no illusions about the U.S.
There was also that interesting bit in the CBS interview.
The one about a possible nuclear weapons deal between Germany, Britain, and France?
Yeah, that one.
Sounds like major power play.
Like Germany is stepping up to take charge of European security, especially with the U.S. seemingly taking a step back.
Okay, so new chancellor, bold vision. But what about the domestic challenges? We can't forget about those.
Oh, there are plenty.
Like immigration. Merz wants to close borders, push for EU-wide reform.
And then there's the economy. Recession, energy crisis, labor shortages.
Merz is talking tax cuts, infrastructure investment. But can he do all that and increase defense spending, too?
And don't forget the debt brake.
Germany's strict rule about government borrowing.
Right. Will he loosen it to achieve his goals? It's going to be a tough balancing act.
It's all happening against the backdrop of, well, history.
Right. The division of Germany, the Cold War, the differences between East and West.
It adds another layer to this whole story.
Especially when you see how the AfD dominates in the former East Germany.
It's like those divisions, that discontent, it never really went away.
Unification was a huge achievement, but the scars remain.
It seems Germany is wrestling with its past while trying to navigate a very uncertain future.
That's a good way to put it.
It's a lot to unpack. We've
Yeah.
only just scratched the surface. But we'll keep digging. Stay with us.
It's amazing how the past can still have such a strong hold.
Yeah, it's like those divisions are still there, just below the surface.
But let's get back to Merz for a second. We've talked about his goals, but what about him as a leader? What's his style?
Well, from what I've gathered, he's,
Decisive.
decisive, bold. Some might even say abrasive.
Not afraid to shake things up.
Exactly. Which could be good for pushing his agenda through.
But could also cause friction, especially with the SPD and the coalition.
That's what I was thinking. And we can't forget the AfD. They'll be watching him like a hawk.
Ready to pounce on any weakness.
Right. One article described him as a pragmatist, though, willing to compromise.
Interesting.
But he's also a staunch conservative, so
There are limits.
definitely. Seems like he's walking a tightrope.
Oh, absolutely. And don't underestimate the SPD. They might have had a bad election, but...
They're still a major player.
Exactly. They'll want to make their mark on this coalition.
And probably push back against some of Merz's more, shall we say, radical ideas.
Oh, I'm sure there'll be some healthy debate.
One article even suggested they might use this coalition to, rehabilitate their image.
After that disastrous election result.
Makes sense. Yeah, they get to be the conscience of the government, keeping Merz in check.
That'll be fascinating to watch. It could lead to some unexpected compromises. Who knows?
So with all these competing priorities, what can the average German realistically expect from a Merz government?
Well, he's promised a lot. Economic revitalization, infrastructure, tax cuts.
Right, but how will he deliver on all that? Especially with increased defense spending and the economic troubles they're already facing.
Something's got to give.
And his stance on immigration, being tough on closing borders, how will that actually play out?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that rhetoric translates into actual policy.
And what about Germany's place on the world stage? If they become more assertive, less aligned with the U.S.?
It could really change the balance of power in Europe.
It's a lot of unknowns. A lot of what we took for granted in global politics is changing.
Feels like we're entering uncharted territory, doesn't it?
Definitely does. Merz has this vision of a strong, independent Europe, but can he achieve it, and at what cost?
Big questions. High stakes, not just for Germany, but for the whole world, really.
Okay, let's address the AfD in the room. They've made these huge gains, but is it sustainable?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Or is it just a temporary thing driven by anxiety?
Hard to say. They've tapped into something real, especially in the East, a discontent that's not going away.
But their views, their connections to extremism, that could turn off more moderate voters. Right?
It's possible. But they've also shown they can adapt. Look at their leader, Alice Weidel.
Openly gay woman leading a party often labeled as homophobic.
That's a paradox, isn't it?
It shows how the far right is changing. It's not just about traditional values anymore.
They're finding new ways to appeal to a wider range of people, and they're very good at using social media.
Yeah, that's something that stood out to me, how successful they are with younger voters, especially online.
It's a whole new battleground. Traditional parties need to catch up.
So, to sum up, we have a potential chancellor with big dreams.
A resurgent far-right party.
A global landscape that's, shifting under our feet.
It's a moment of both opportunity and danger for Germany. How they handle this will determine their future and maybe even ours.
Whew. We've really gone deep on this one.
A lot to digest.
For sure. I feel like I have a better understanding of what's going on in Germany now, but it's definitely raised more questions than answers.
That's often the case with these complex situations.
What would you say are the biggest takeaways for our listener? What should they really keep in mind?
Well, I think the key takeaway is that Germany is at a turning point. Many things we thought were, stable, reliable.
The economy, political consensus, that close relationship with the U.S.
Exactly. Those are all in flux now. With the rise of the AfD, Merz pushing for independence, these economic worries.
It does feel like a fundamental shift.
It is, and I think this shift goes beyond Germany.
You think it's happening across Europe?
Even globally, we're seeing this rise in populism, a questioning of old alliances, a lot of uncertainty about the future.
And Germany's right in the thick of it.
Exactly. So what happens there, it really matters for the rest of the world.
One thing that really struck me is how the past keeps shaping the present.
The legacy of division, the Cold War, yeah.
It might seem like ancient history, but
it still has a profound impact.
It's a reminder that history isn't just, something in a textbook.
It shapes our perspectives, our choices. And to really understand Germany today, you have to understand its history.
So, going forward, what should we be watching for? What are the key things to keep an eye on?
Well, first and foremost, the new government. Can Merz actually form a coalition with the SPD?
What will that look like? What compromises will they have to make?
And how will the AfD respond? They won't just sit back and watch.
And of course, that big question about Germany's relationship with the U.S.
Will this push for independence cause more friction? Or can they find a way to work together?
It's a tough situation. Merz has to stand up for Germany's interests, but he also needs to maintain those key relationships.
With the U.S., with other European partners, it's a delicate balancing act.
It feels like Germany's trying to figure out its place in the world.
Finding a new balance between national interests and global responsibilities.
A lot of countries are probably going through something similar right now, with all the change happening.
It's a time of both anxiety and opportunity. The decisions made today will have lasting consequences.
This deep dive has been really illuminating, I have to say. I feel like I understand the situation in Germany so much better now, and I'll definitely be following it closer.
I'm glad to hear that.
As we wrap up, is there a final thought, a key question for our listener to ponder?
The question I keep coming back to is this. Can Friedrich Merz, with his big ambitions, his, let's say, strong personality, can he navigate this incredibly complex landscape?
Can he bring a divided nation together, deliver on his promises, deal with the AfD, and manage this strained relationship with the U.S.?
The next few years will be a real test for Germany, and the choices they make, well, they'll have consequences far beyond their borders.
Feels like we're at the beginning of a new chapter in German history.
We'll have to wait and see how it unfolds.
We'll definitely be keeping an eye on things, and we'll be back with more deep dives as the situation develops. Thanks for joining us on this journey. And to our listener, remember, stay curious, stay informed, and keep learning.